Hey, deserving listeners, 90 Day Fiancé bears all. Let's watch. By the way, this and any of my videos might contain triggering material, so watch with care. Let's watch.
I don't think I drink too much. I feel like I go to work a lot. When I'm at work, I never drink, obviously. So you can imagine if I go to work for 1 month, 2 months, I don't drink that whole time. So when I come back, I want to be able to enjoy myself. I want to drink sociably. Like, it's not like I'm getting hammered every day. I drink sociably. I like to hang out with friends and have drinks. I don't see anything wrong with that.
All right, interesting question. Sean's asking him a question we all would like to know. Does Jovi think he drinks too much? Now, we don't know how much he drinks. We only see what they choose to edit in. There are a number of moments where he seemed, fairly intoxicated, slurring his words, real kind of droopy eyes. And at that point, it's not just a couple drinks, right? It's a number of drinks. And what he's saying is when he goes on his trips, he doesn't drink the whole time. And when he comes back, he likes to drink sociably, he says. And okay, now from the outside, it's common that people say, oh, he's an alcoholic, there's something wrong with him. But really it comes down to, is it impacting his life negatively? And that's a very subjective question. Now, for some, it's not very subjective. There are objective measures like a liver transplant, or you have multiple DUIs, or even one DUI for that matter, or I don't know, you are blackout drunk frequently and fall down the stairs and hurt yourself. They're pretty objective things that would indicate you've passed the threshold, and no one would think that you don't have a problem with alcohol. But there's a pretty big gray zone of severity of drinking and negative consequences that it is a little bit subjective. Now, to clinicians, especially drug and alcohol counselors, on average, I find their threshold is pretty low, meaning that if there's any negative consequence, because there's always some negative consequences to drinking, whether it is being hungover once a year, or losing sleep a little bit, or the extra calories that you don't want, or you said something that you wouldn't have said normally, or you risked driving drunk, or you had to pay the money to take the Uber instead of driving. Those are negative consequences, right? If you didn't drink, you wouldn't have had to pay for the Uber. You would have saved $35. And for some people, particularly drug and alcohol counselors, not always, for sure, but their threshold is pretty low, meaning that if there's any negative consequence, you have a problem and you're in denial. Other people would have a higher threshold, and there's a lot of things in between. So does Jovi have a problem with drinking? We can't know from watching the show. We would have to talk with him. We'd have to talk to Yara. Now, Yara would probably say, yeah, there are negative consequences. But let's hypothesize about the negative consequences that we have seen, or we've seen hints of. When he drinks, he tends to have a hard time navigating his relationship with Yara. Some of, if not all, of their biggest fights occurred when he seemed highly intoxicated. There was that party, the engagement party. He seemed highly intoxicated there, and apparently he was ignoring Yara at the party and not considering her feelings. She didn't know anyone at that party, remember, and she was getting more and more upset. Now, I'm trying to remember the details of that, but if I remember right, I remember my take was, yes, Jovi should have spent more effort to make her feel welcome or to pay attention to her. But at the same time, it's sort of circumstantial. She doesn't know anyone, or she barely knows anyone, and he knows everyone. I mean, it was all his friends and family, and maybe she just ducks out, disappears for an hour or something, or leaves early, or just finds someone to hang out with for a while and just says, well, this isn't really my party and I'm going to feel a little bit ignored here. It's a favor that you do for your partner. We all have to do that occasionally with our in-laws. Anyway, so I think that her feelings were valid, but I felt like the escalation was, now I wasn't there, but but he was intoxicated. Would he have noticed her feelings more if he wasn't that intoxicated? I would say probably, right? It seems likely that Jovi, the more intoxicated he becomes, the less able he is to notice things. Your brain just doesn't work quite as right when you're intoxicated. So that would be a negative consequence. That was one fight. And then there was the other fight where they were at the strip club, right? So that could be alcohol could be a factor there as well. Could even be a factor in wanting to go there in the first place. He seems to be pretty interested in going out and drinking. And for some people like Jovi, they associate, they want to drink a lot because they have a dependency, a physical and emotional dependency, which those are different things. They're related. And meaning that you can become physically addicted, as they will say, meaning that you will go through pretty severe withdrawal symptoms, or you'll have pretty severe physiological cravings. And behaviorally and emotionally, you can become dependent on a substance because you need it to cope with emotions, you need it to numb out from trauma, or you need it to feel like you can socialize or have a good time. You don't know what it's like to have a good time without drinking. So, it's hard to know what's going on with him. But for some people, they will want to drink a lot of alcohol, but they don't, if they feel weird or ashamed just sitting there at home in front of the TV drinking. So they're attracted to things that involve a lot of drinking. Strip clubs might be associated for that, with that for him. And so he might be really interested in doing that because I don't know. This is a lot of speculation. And there were other instances where he was highly, that one time when they had date night away from the child and they got into a fight and he was like laying into her about being a lump on a log. And it was like, where is that coming from? We could imagine that his brain isn't really functioning quite well and starts a fight because of his brain not functioning well, and also doesn't know how to pull out of a fight. That's one of the things that will happen for a lot of couples is when they're intoxicated, there will be a little bit of a fight, but they don't have the normal brain function to be able to pull out of the fight. There's a nosedive, and if you're sober and differentiated enough, you can be like, okay, let's divert this way, and so it doesn't go further down the hole. Whereas when you're intoxicated, things could really, really fall off the deep end because there's no ability to think straight of like, well, wait, what's happening right now? And you get all triggered anyway. So we could say that as negative consequences. Obviously, Yara doesn't appreciate his drinking that much. We could possibly see hints of it impacting his parenting. If he's drinking while at home, when you're drinking, you're not, especially with a young child, you're not going to be as capable, as competent. I don't know if that's true for Jovi, but we could imagine that being true. He might even be attracted to this kind of job because of the drinking. It might be sort of part and parcel to the job where it all kind of justifies it. That I've seen military folks that will be this way when they go on tours. They will come back and it'll just be like long stretches of drinking, and then they go back to, deployment, and there's no or very little substance use during the time, and it all kind of fits together. It's like this tension and release cycle that they can get into, and without the tension, they feel like they won't need the release. And then it's like, well, if I just have a 9-to-5 job, does that mean I just binge drink on the weekends? And it feels like it doesn't justify the partying lifestyle that much. I don't know. I'm making stuff up at this point, but the bottom line is we don't know, and we don't have data. Maybe they'll get into it.
Okay. So at average party, if you go out and drink with your friends, how many drinks?
Oh, I drink a lot. When I drink, I'm going to drink a lot. So,
okay.
Usually I have, I don't know, like in a night, at least 10 beers or something like that. But I'm not so.
So 10 beers, we would probably multiply that by 1.5, because usually people, especially in a context like this, will minimize. Now, to Sean's face, she's like, whoa. Now, for her, I'm guessing that she doesn't drink that much. And so 10 beers to her would put her under the table long before she had her 10th beer. To someone like Jovi, his tolerance is probably so high, and he's probably drinking over such an amount of time that I don't doubt that he gets hammered because we've seen him, and he even basically just said that. But for him, 10 to 15 beers is like, for Sean, maybe like 3 to 7 or something. But anyway, it's considered binge drinking past 6 drinks, I think, past 5 drinks or something. Now, what is binge drinking? I don't know. There's a lot of categorizations. Let's get away from drinking and think about other kinds of activities that people will say. Like, say someone shops a lot. They shop almost every day online for clothes. And they have a fair amount of credit card debt. And sometimes they're like, yeah, sometimes I probably shop too much online for clothes. Is that person addicted? Well, it's kind of debatable. Do they have a problem? Are there negative consequences? Are their negative consequences big enough? Is it just that their spouse doesn't like them spending their money that way? Is that really a problem? Or is it just like, hey, but I like spending my money this way? So 10 beers, that sounds like a lot. Now, there are certain signs, like so I'll say that it wouldn't be unusual I wouldn't be surprised if we did a full evaluation of him that he would qualify for substance use disorders, alcohol use disorder. And the signs are that he binge drinks. That's one. That he says he drinks often. That we've seen him pretty hammered and there have been negative consequences. That he says there's no problem. So the fact that he drinks that much and claims there's no problem is a red flag. If he drank that much and said, yeah, you know what, me and my friends, we drink a lot. Sometimes it probably gets a little excessive, and sometimes I try to sort of pull back a little bit. And lately I've been trying to cut down, and yeah, it is kind of a problem, honestly. So if I heard that from him, I would go, oh, okay, well, he's admitting he has a problem. But given what Jovi's saying, and he's saying, I have no problem, then that can sometimes indicate a bigger problem. At the very least, it indicates the possibility that he's in denial. And why do people do that? Well, one is because of normalization. If you hang around a lot of other people that are doing this, and you were always around those people, and of course you tend to attract those people, and you tend to be attracted to them because they justify your lifestyle, then it can seem normal. You'll hear people who use a lot of substances, the way that if you ever hear them talk about their substance use, you'll just be like, whoa, but they seem to all think of it as like, it's just how things go. Yeah, I vomited last night, but what are you going to do? It happens sometimes. And the other guy would be like, yeah, what are you going to do? And you're hearing it and you're like, I haven't vomited from drinking alcohol since I was 17. You do it regularly? Because to them, it's normal. And then if you brought something up like that, they would kick you out of their friend group because of the challenge to their lifestyle. The other reason is that for denial is people can become quite ashamed of themselves and will recognize they need to slow down. And they might even try to slow down, but they can't because of the physical, behavioral, emotional compulsion that they have. And then they're at a crossroads. They're like, okay, either I continue trying and failing to cut back, or I go into denial about the whole thing. And I'm just like, it's fine. Everyone does this. No big deal. It's much easier to do that. Another reason that denial happens is, another crossroad it happens is I can either go down this road of sobriety and face a lot of difficulty, not only with trying to get sober, but also with like dealing with the emotions that I've been putting off since I was 14 years old when I first started drinking, which I don't even know if that's possible to do. Or I can go into denial and say everything's fine, and then I don't have to face my fears. I don't have to face my traumas. I don't have to face my insecurities. And it's easier that way, right? And so the person, it's somewhat conscious, it's somewhat subconscious, but it becomes subconscious, where the person eventually habitually just really, really convinces themselves that everything's fine, and you hook them up to a lie detector test, which doesn't exist, they wouldn't be lying when they say they don't think they have a problem. But that's what denial does, right? You can see someone passing out in a gutter every night and, blacking out every other night. They don't have any friends. They've lost their job. Their health is falling apart. And they'll say, I don't have a problem. And you're looking at them, you're thinking, you're lying to yourself. But the brain knows how to play tricks on itself such that you don't have to face pain. And denial is one of those mechanisms.
So drunk, okay?
What? How many?
Beers, though. Beers don't really get you that drunk.
10
Yeah, I think so.
a night?
See, it's just classic substance use disorder statements. It's just 10 beers. It's not a big deal. They don't get you that drunk. And it's possible that in comparison to other things that he can drink, having 10 beers is actually he actually doesn't get that drunk. One, tolerance. Two, comparative wise. But you hear it in his language. Again, it'd be one thing if he said, well, to be honest, I kind of do drink too much sometimes, and I do wonder about that. I'm trying right now to see if I can drink without over drinking. So, if he said something like that, then it would be more credible. But the tone and the vibe he has is that of someone that has a classic case of a problem. I don't know if he has it, but there's signs.
We wrap, you go hang out with your friends, all right, pre-COVID. How many beers would you drink in one night? After this show? Yeah, after that.
So Sean is asking the crew, I think they must be a lot of dudes. After there's a wrap, how much do you drink? Now, I don't know if she's going to get a lot of contrast with Jovi. My impression of I don't know what you call the tech crew sort of dudes is that there can be a fair amount of drinking. So I don't know. Is that a stereotype? Is that wrong? But anyway, let's hear what they say.
Hey, at least I got somebody on my team here.
He said after this show, because this show will make you drink. Right. Okay. Yeah. How many? 6. 10. 2, 3. Who said 10?
Thank you.
12. What?
Right. So the crew is saying 6, 10, 12, and now Sean can say, well, I think y'all have a problem. So just the fact that there are others in a similar category with him. Now, as outsiders, it's unfair to just hear something like that and say, you have a problem, without really knowing. Plus, is that really what we're interested in doing, just shaming someone, especially if they're in the midst of denial? There's a shame compulsive cycle where if people feel ashamed, which they often are, of their use, particularly from the outside, but also on the inside, that causes a lot of pain, which causes them to need to use. And then they incur consequences, they feel ashamed, and it just goes round and round and round. And it is one of the main turbines upon which the airplane of addiction will fly. If I was to go with that analogy or the metaphor. Shame is the first thing that I attack with people who have substance use problems. We have to really bring it out and look at it and work on it and dismantle it and get rid of it. And it can take literally 10 years of therapy to do that, because the shame began when someone was very young.
No, I can't do this anymore. Like, I'm blocking you. This is over with. I can't handle this.
All right, let's talk about Yara. What are some of the things that you do that bug Yara?
She claims I leave my socks everywhere. I don't think that's that big of a deal. And I think I kick my socks off in my sleep. So it's kind of like unintentional.
All right. This is actually a pet peeve of mine regarding men. As a couples therapist, I will hear things like this. I don't know if Jovi has having this issue. We could imagine that he would. We actually heard the exact same thing from Libby and from Andre, that they were, asked to identify the most annoying thing about Andre, and both of them said it's the fact that Andre just leaves his socks everywhere, his dirty socks everywhere. And now Jovi is saying that Yara's upset with that. On the scale of things, it's probably not going to break a marriage, but it is a red flag for misogyny and sexism regarding chores. When you have, we as men are sometimes socialized as boys to believe that cleanliness is woman's work, that chores around the house are woman's work, laundry is particularly woman's work. And you might even have a mom who just does it for you. And you have a mom and a dad where the dad never picks up his clothes and the mom just grumbles and picks up around him. And you can be socialized into that thinking. One, that there's just a magical process that picks up your socks and cleans them. Two, that you are basically being a woman if you concern yourself with picking up after yourself. And men are, to understand why toxic masculinity exists, you have to understand one of the main pillars. And one of the main pillars that is taught to boys, decreasingly so as we move into 2021, but still highly prevalent, is that if you are a woman, if you act like a woman, then you are not a man at all. If you just have one behavior out of 1,000 that could be mistaken for that of a woman, then you're not a man at all. Everything else is thrown out, and not only are you not a man, but you have no worth as a human being. Those are the very strange, illogical connections that are made. So anything that could be mistaken for a man, for a woman, you are not a man, and you are worthless as a human being. Your entire worth as a man hinges on being seen all the time as a man. Now, a lot of people today are throwing that out the window, thank goodness, not only with gender fluidity, trans, but also just people getting rid of toxic masculinity and saying, I'm a man, and I just don't ascribe to that silliness. I see above it. I see the matrix. I see the messages. I see the assumptions. I see the value, and I'm just not going to buy into that. A common example of this is just think about all the ways that men will insult other men. It often has to do with feminizing them. And I won't say them because they're quite vulgar and disturbing, but there are so many ways in which men will try to humiliate other men, sometimes even friends, through making them out to be a woman, which you have to tell yourself, that's effed up. It's like, what's wrong with being a woman? What's wrong with being feminine as a man? But somehow that is the worst insult you could ever tell someone. And when you are looking at your socks on the floor, you think, well, one, I've never had to deal with that. Two, if I even kind of go there in my mind and get concerned about that, that makes me a woman, which I can't have. And so some guys will even play it up. They'll just leave stuff out on purpose because they want to really just make sure that everyone, including themselves, understands that they're a man. And men are messy. Men are like Homer Simpson, who do things dangerous and don't care about the rules. There's all these very strange associated. It's like, how did those things? Anyway, so I don't know if Jovi is suffering from that and is been socialized into that. But I didn't comment on the Andre and Libby situation, so I am here.
But I guess it happens.
So you go to bed with your socks on?
Yes. Is that weird? I think that's normal.
There's nothing wrong with going to bed with your socks on. I personally can't, even if I mean, unless it's like really cold, then I'm just like, yeah, socks all the way. But anyway, the other thing I'll say is that there's nothing wrong with getting weird, getting messy. There's nothing wrong with being messy. That's not, if your husband is messy or you as a man are messy, that doesn't mean you're buying into toxic masculinity. I'm just saying that sometimes it can be a sign of that. And it's possible that Jovi is just has a different standard of that sort of thing. So anyway. All right, well, that is it for that episode of Psychology in Seattle. You can join the conversation by commenting below or going to the Discord or the subreddit or the Facebooks or the Instagrams. It's always fun to interact with other people, and sometimes I'll, comment or reply. And everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.